going to talk about money and funds and funding and grants, and also about finding a space and a venue, both of which can be very tricky things, especially the venue part. That's something that we struggled with. The two are very much interconnected because although you don't necessarily need money to have a venue, if you end up getting a grant or you have some kind of money, like the venue is kind of the biggest expenditure and the biggest thing that you will have to pay for. So first of all, I guess you kind of want to think about what you think the size of your event could be, like a rough number of people, and as well like a kind of little budget list of what you might need. Although you might think like really all you need is to get the people together and have like some chairs and tables. It's important to remember to like write that down because there could be venues that don't have enough chairs and tables. You might need something else. Although our spaces have been small enough that we haven't needed like a microphone for people to talk, it was important for us to record the audio of the different panels that we did. So we did have a microphone hooked up to my or Anna's laptops, I think. A lot of that stuff we just asked for on Twitter and hope to find someone who could do it. There are other things such as art supplies for a zine workshop or some kind of craft circle that you might want to buy, and although it might not seem very much, it's useful to lay it all out so you know what your costs are, or ideally what you would have money for. Both last year and this year, me and Anna applied for some different like youth funding grants for community events and community projects and things like that. I will put a list of some of the different ones that I know of down below. Most of them obviously are UK based because GirlCon is in the UK, but I'm sure there are other opportunities, or I really hope there are, in other countries as well. We've been really lucky to get a grant last year and this year from the same grant funding people. It's V Inspired. And we're really grateful for that because it has allowed us to do some things. I'll just go over some of the grant application stuff first. Even if you think that you don't need to apply for a grant, or it's too much work, or you think you can just find someplace that can donate the space for free, even like that would be great, and that totally could happen, but it could also be really useful to have the extra funds. So if you want to try getting into the process, I think most youth-funded grants tend to be pretty accessible in that they want young people to apply, so they don't make you write like an entire essay. For the applications that we've done, you need like a basic person who can be the representative with all the contact info and all of that stuff, and then basically you just have to write up a kind of bio of what you want to do, who you want to do it with, like how you think it will make your community better, or how it will connect different people, how it will give back or provide opportunities, and just kind of a list of the kind of volunteers or people you might need and the kind of resources that you'll need. So that is when having a budget will be useful. Even if you're not really sure how much things are going to cost, just kind of ballpark or guesstimate some figures. And so it adds up to like whatever the amount is that you could get the grant for, basically. Some other things that we tried to put into our budget, aside from like the main fee, which is venue space, is art supplies for the zine workshop. Last year it was the ability to print out zines that we made, the GirlCon zine, which has been a bit of like a hassle trying to get together. We'd also really like to have a paid photographer who could take pictures of the event like professionally, and also to be able to at least contribute something to travel costs for speakers and attendees. And that is something that we are working on. We'll have to like see how much we can contribute to that in the end, and that is one of the big things about, even if you get a small grant for your event, like a huge part of it is going to be run on volunteer time from both like the organizers and the panelists and whoever comes and helps out in any way that they can. So considering that you can't actually fully pay people the way that like their work deserves or merits to be paid, it is nice to be able to offer some other things. Like this year we're hoping to be able to bring some food in so that there's like fresh fruit or something that people can share.
Depending on the type of project you're doing, I think you do need to have somebody who is the one that is, in terms of like boring stuff like filling out funding forms, the one who is in contact with the funding body. So you do need to make sure there is one person who will definitely respond to those emails, because otherwise it can just get very confusing.
Back to venues. So last year we were really lucky to find the Mayday Rooms in London, which is like an activist workers' rights space in London, which also has a great zine archive. and I think we found them through the Feminist Library or something like that. Basically a lot of online research because they weren't a place that we had heard of before. We were also really lucky that they donated their space to us for the 2 days that we did the event. They had someone who was Bryony, who we were connecting with over the time, who could be on site during the event. She wasn't like patrolling us or supervising every panel. And also, like, that makes her sound like a terrible person. She was a fantastic person, and we would have been totally happy for her to sit in on, like, every event. But basically she was around and like our chaperone person, so that if anything went wrong, she was there to help out. In looking for venues, I would definitely suggest looking for places with similar vibes, like activist spaces, if that's kind of the general vibe you want for your event, or places that support young people, like community centers, places that might already put on events for young people. Finding a venue has been like a bit of a ginormous struggle, mainly because if you search like London venues, you're gonna find places that are like $1 billion an hour, and we just don't have that kind of money even with our funding. So it's been partly like finding something that you could afford and also that could actually fit what you want. Like another thing that we really wanted to have in our space is a projector if possible, so that if someone's doing a talk they can project slides or images, or that we can play bits of movies. It's really nice to have a sound system so that we can play music even though it's not like totally necessary. Also, if you want to do a music event or anything like that, it would be really cool to have the equipment to put something like that on. I think a really great place to start is like the community centers. I think it's also definitely useful to check in on local high schools, maybe your own high school, to see if they rent space over the summer or if they're open to having some kind of community event going on. That is something that we did quite late in our looking at venues, which just goes to show that it takes some time figuring out like where the best place to start is, and it can be a bit stressful and like time consuming. One of the really important things for us in selecting the venue this time around is accessibility. I mean, it was also important to us last year, but we ended up choosing the Mayday rooms, which had a lot of stairs that were quite steep, and obviously it wasn't very accessible in that way. It did have a gender-neutral toilet, which was awesome, but it was like on a separate floor. So this year we really wanted to make sure that the venue had a ramp or an elevator or whatever else someone might need, so that it is easier for people to get to. I read a short article recently about like how to make venues accessible and how to look for accessible venues, and one of the big things that it stressed was also advertising, which we definitely got last year as well. Lots of people on our Tumblr were asking like, to what degree is it accessible, like what is it like getting there. I think it's definitely helpful once you have a venue and you've like checked it out and tried to figure out to be able to like write up and explain to other people both like how to get there, like what are the bus routes like, is it difficult to get there from downtown, how easy is it to get to in that sense, and then not to get overly annoying on the list thing, but I think it is helpful to have a list of the things that you would like in a venue and also kind of your priorities of the things that you most need to like the ones that you would maybe be flexible on if there was no other option. It's good to come up with a list of questions based on like what you're looking for to have to be able to email or to ask on the phone, or if you're going to in person to visit a venue. So that you know like what the situation is. Like for instance, if the venues are open to having an event that's like mainly run by teens, and if the venues need anything in terms of having like a chaperone or any kind of insurance issues that might come up because you have young people doing a thing. I think it's also important to remember location, if it's near any food places, to make note of those food places so that you can let other people know, so they know at least what their options are. And yeah. Oh, I guess the other thing that I should mention is also dates. It's important to check with your venue if they're free around the time that you would like to have your event. Probably not a holiday weekend because people could have other plans, but whatever works.
There's nothing I want, but money inside.